He is the only man in the business who's represented nearly 30 first-round draft picks over the last 3 years and was a 10th-round pick in the 1974 draft himself. Good to have Tom Condon of Creative Artists Agency right here in the Rich Eisen Show studio. How are you, Tom?
I'm doing great, Rich. Thank you for having me.
What's the first deal you did in your career? The first one?
The first one was actually while I was still playing, and it was Art Still, who was my locker mate.
In New England? Or at the end in Kansas City?
No, I was still playing in Kansas City at the time.
Right.
Art Still had been the second pick in the first round in the draft, and he was going on to his second contract. We called him 1 mil Still because he had signed originally, I think it was a 7-year contract for $1 million. And at the end of that deal, he said, "Tommy, why don't you represent me?" And I said, "Art, I'm sitting next to you in the locker room." And he said, "Oh, you'll figure it out. Just do it."
Are you serious?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Did you ever communicate to him that you wanted to be somebody who would do a contract or an agent or something?
At the time I was, I don't remember if I was the president of the union, but I was certainly on the executive committee and had been the player rep and all that kind of stuff. So he was used to, talking to me about those kinds of things. And I was still in law school at the time, and I had a buddy in law school who wanted to be a sports agent, so we did it together.
So did you go to Lamar Hunt? Is that who you dealt with at the time?
No,
Okay.
it would, and I didn't do it. I wrote everything up, gave it to my buddy Tony Agnone,
right,
and he would read it to Jim Schaff, who was our general manager.
Okay, and then you became the president of the NFLPA at some point, obviously, in your career?
Yeah, 84 to 86. I did that 2-year stint as president.
What were the main issues at the time when you were there?
We had just finished the 82 strike. And so the 82 strike was 57 days, longest strike in the history of professional sports up until baseball when they stayed out for a year.
Yeah, the 94 World Series getting blown off.
Right.
But
nevertheless, so at the end of that time, the strike, I nominated Gene Upshaw as executive director. He was voted in unanimously as executive director of the NFL Players Union, and subsequently I got nominated for president, and I won that election.
What's your relationship with the current executive running the Players Association, D. Smith?
We have a warm relationship, and he's a very bright guy, and I think he's very well-meaning and a really good lawyer.
No, not to get into it, but I mean, we might as well. What's the horizon look like right now with the Players Association and the league needing to get a new collective bargaining agreement that's about 3 years away when this really begins to heat up? Or is it heating up right now based on what you could tell, Tom?
I think there at least seems to be some engagement now on some different issues. But I would think this: the players are always going to have a kind of a difficult issue, and the issue is there's 1,800 of them, and the 1,800 go from the majority who are playing for the minimum. And then you've got another group of players that are, at the very top end of the spectrum, and they're making between $20 and $30 million a year. So you've got guys that, 500, 600,000, and they're, taking care of their families and many of them extended families, that kind of thing. And a player like, Matty Ice there in Atlanta, It's hard to go to him and say, "Hey, we want you to sit out for a year and miss $30 million. As much as it is the $500,000 player that you're saying it's hard to sit out for a year because you don't have any money, and how are you going to live?
It's also hard to turn to somebody of the natural, is what I call him, Tom, just to be fully above board in the conversation. He says he likes it. I don't believe it, right? Even though he doesn't lie.
I don't think he likes it.
Okay, now I know, but it's tough to go to somebody of Matt Ryan or anybody, doesn't matter how much money they make, of his high character, of which there are a majority in the NFL players of that high character, and say, let's walk because we need to make sure that player discipline is a way that we like it, even though, it may not be sitting on their doorstep at any point in time. Right, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely, because the player discipline issue is so difficult to fight for, because you're talking about such a small percentage of the players that are going to have this as a potential issue. And so the majority of the guys, the vast majority of the guys, are absolutely as good a people as you could ever meet. And so, and as a matter of fact, I've always gone through the recruiting process thinking about, intelligence, character, and passion for the game. And it goes without saying that they have to be able to play. But nevertheless, those guys, they'll play forever. So you get people like Antonio Gates and Anquan Bolden and Tony Gonzalez and all that type of player, and they go on and play for 16, 17 years.
Tom Condon, agent here on the Rich Eisen Show. What is Bolden up to these days, Tom?
Well, Q would still like to play. And,
he would.
He would, yes. But he's got a lovely family, and he would like to play. And ideally, he'd like to play someplace close to their home in South Florida, so that he could get back and forth to see the children and to watch his sons play sports.
Well, we just saw an opening potentially due to surgery in Jacksonville. I mean, is your phone rung on that front?
Well, actually, my phone just rang, and it was Anquan right before I came on the show, so I've got to call him as soon as we get off.
Okay, so he still wants to play, despite him saying he wanted to step back to deal with social issues primarily. He would like to get back on the football field and play again.
He would, and last year there wasn't, he signed with Buffalo,
right,
and then withdrew, and he did because of the issue with his children, my understanding of it is that at the very end, his oldest son asked him to stay home.
Are you hearing from members of front offices that players are not going to be signed, or we don't want guys coming on because they might be socially active? Are you hearing any of that, Tom?
No, I haven't heard that at all. It hasn't come up as an issue.
Or is that because your players are not predominantly socially active? Or I'm just trying to determine, as you know, the issue with Eric Reed and Colin Kaepernick not having jobs, and clearly you take a look across the landscape and they're talented enough to get jobs. Do you think that there's any there based on your conversations you've had, Tom?
I would guess so, and it's interesting because if you're socially active and it's going to be a controversial issue, then yes, potentially that's going to hurt you in the job market, as does my players who are 33 years old or so. There's an unbelievable age bias. Because you feel that once you hit 33, your skills diminish? Well, actually, it's anybody over 30 is in jeopardy. But when you're getting to 33 or 34, they think not only is your speed going to go, but that you're more susceptible to injury. And this is non-quarterbacks, clearly, right? I mean, you've got clients like Eli and Brees. I mean, these are guys who are getting up there, to say the least. Yeah, I think Drew's, 39 now? He is. Yeah, and Eli's getting up there as well. How much longer do you think, Tom Condon here on the Rich Eisen Show, how much longer do you think Eli wants to play? Well, we've got 2 years left on the contract, so I would guess he's going to at least play through those two. But I would also think that he keeps himself in tremendous condition. He's good at every part of it. I mean, whether it's the diet or the flexibility or the sleep or the actual cardio and strength workouts, he does it all, and so I don't doubt that he can play for several more years. How about Brees? He says he wants to go to 45. And I'll tell you, his preparation is absolutely impeccable. I mean, and he's not a huge man, right? I mean, he's 6 feet tall and 203 pounds, and he looks like iron. I mean, when he takes his shirt off and he's just all abs and rippling muscles. And one day I said, Drew, I said, you throw the ball with such velocity and with such distance. I said, at your age, how do you do it? And he said, I throw it with my body. I don't throw it with my arm. Interesting. Do you get the sense that the Saints want him around till he's in his mid-40s, Tom? Well, I think that the Saints are just like everybody else. You start to get nervous when a guy's 40 years old, right? Mm-hmm. And you're thinking about, well, we've got to replace him at some point. So they've got to look around. Tom Condon here on the Rich Eisen Show. Is Sam Bradford, do you believe he's going to be starting for the Arizona Cardinals
against Washington in a couple weeks.
Yes, I love Sam. He was. I just recall when I was first associated with him, or trying to be associated with him. He had won the Heisman at Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
He came back his senior year to try to win the national championship. He injured his throwing shoulder, and instead of sitting out or getting surgery, he decided to try to play again. And he went back in and, of course, blew his shoulder. And so we had to set his pro day back as close to the draft as we possibly could, and then it was the finest workout I've ever seen.
And so while we're on this subject, as somebody who, if you will, calls the action, Tom Condon, for the Combine and the NFL Network and the programming that it brings to the fans and also to the NFL Network's ratings, why do you tell clients to not throw at the Combine when they're going to be first overall selections, Tom? Is that what you're doing?
Well, sometimes. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, can you stop doing that, Tom? Come on now. What's the point of that?
Well, it's interesting. We had Josh Allen throw this year.
Yes.
And Sam Darnold did not. And so it's one of those things where I went to the spring game to see Josh play.
Yes.
And so you can't help but look at him and think to yourself, oh my God, he's 6'5", 240 pounds, and he looks athletic and he's explosive when he runs, and he moves like an athlete. And then the ball came out of his hand, and I'd never seen anything like it in my life.
Well, I mean, that's what we want to see them throw. There's a competition that we want to see from these guys at the Combine.
Right.
So I guess then let me ask you this. What do you think is the benefit of not throwing?
The benefit of not throwing is that it's a fairly unrealistic kind of a setup, from the standpoint of the quarterback's going to throw to receivers that he doesn't know, that he's never seen before, running routes that they may call it the same, but run it differently at their schools.
No, I know, but scouts and evaluators know that Darnold would be throwing to somebody who he's never thrown to before, and the route was not run properly, and they wouldn't count it as a grade against Darnold.
I don't count on them not counting anything. So I just never want to see my player not have a good day. And so every time that they're going to be in front of the NFL people, I expect them to be absolutely prepared for whatever they're going to have happen.
Tom Condon here on the Rich Eisen Show. Are we seeing right now more top-of-the-line players holding out or having problems getting long-term contracts because we're seeing running backs like Bell, wide receivers potentially like Beckham? It seems that everything's going well. I know these are not your clients, so I say this fully understanding. And Aaron Donald, who is within your universe in your office but not your client, and Khalil Mack, not your client. Guys who are saying, I want to be paid like quarterbacks or have my salary have a larger percentage than previous guys towards a quarterback rate. Are we seeing more holdouts because NFL front offices are not going to pay guys in that regard? Tom Condon.
Well, it's interesting because ever since 1993 and the inception of the salary cap, the money had to funnel to the players that changed the outcome of the game, and the outcome of the game is determined on third down. And so you look at the players that are making plays on third down, and offensively, that's typically your quarterback and your left offensive tackle and your deep threat wide receiver. And then defensively, it's going to be the player in the secondary that turns the ball over and the disruptive defensive lineman. And so we're talking about virtually the same five positions have always held the highest average per year or franchise tag since 1993. And so that's not going to change. But I think that maybe because, for instance, with Aaron Donald, we're not used to seeing a defensive tackle, have that kind of an impact. Although, what's the defensive tackle in Philadelphia? My partner represents him too.
Is it Fletcher Cox or Bennett? Or
Cox.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, who also makes a huge impact. But I just remember watching Aaron Donald at the Senior Bowl and thinking, okay, he's unblockable.
He is, I know. But we're also seeing in the same way that the catch rule had to be changed, because we're seeing guys like Des Bryant take 2 steps and it's the span of 10 yards, whereas we never used to see that. The combine, just to bring that up again real quick, guys are getting bigger, stronger, faster. They're jumping out of the building. So positions need to change in that regard. I mean, Le'Veon Bell, what he's doing, he's touching the ball and impacting the game. And again, I know these are not your clients, but what I'm saying is, where is this all going? Do you think there will be a front office that fully understanding it's been this way since '93 says it's the changing of the game? We saw Gurley get a nice contract, for instance. I mean, are we going to see that? Where is this all going in your estimation?
Well, it's interesting because Gurley and Aaron Donald are on the same team, right? And Gurley, the running back, who typically the NFL thinks the running backs are, interchangeable,
fungible,
dime a dozen, and they have a short career length, and so that's that's why the rookie system has probably been more difficult for the running back than for any other position, and so
you don't think this is going to change at all, essentially?
No, I think you'll have some exceptions, but I don't think you're going to see any overall, massive changes.
And what about guaranteed contracts like the one we saw Kirk Cousins just sign in Minnesota?
Yeah, it was interesting. Kirk Cousins had a 3-year guarantee on his contract.
Yes.
But prior to that time, he had 3 one-year contracts, correct?
Yeah, and he made a lot more money.
Right.
Sure, yeah.
So totally he was 6 years going through that process. And 3 of the years he knew were guaranteed when he signed the contract, but prior to that, he had to do 1 year at a time, and he did that for 3 years before he got the 3-year contract.
Yes.
So ideally, it is that, as a for instance, in a player like Alex Smith, who's on his now 3rd team.
Yes.
And he goes to Washington and does a $71 million guarantee, and the $71 million is guaranteed completely by March of 2019, and the $71 million is also paid by the end of the 3rd year. So, I mean, structuring the contract is more important than the average per year.
So, when finishing up with Alex Smith, who I love. Okay, love. Even though I believe you told him not to throw at the combine too, didn't you, Tom?
Yes, I did.
See, I've got a memory like an elephant when I'm covering the combine from the NFL, okay, from the NFL Network. I love Alex Smith. Love him. We had him on at the Super Bowl this year. He was doing some promotional business. I asked him point blank, do you know what your future is? Do you know where you're going? And he said, I feel like I should have the opportunity to go wherever I want to go. Later on that day, it's announced he's going to Washington. Did Alex Smith lie to me on that day, Tom? Did he lie to me that day?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, we didn't know that until the last minute.
Really? Later on that night? Okay. Well, you tell. What other teams were there then? What other teams were there for his services?
Actually, Andy never told me. He just said that he was that he picked the best team for him.
I'll tell you what, man. He's set up, and I really love that guy. He's just a great community guy. He's a great guy, and he's just he's a guy that has just succeeded beyond what a lot of people have expected, despite his #1 overall draft status.
Well, yeah, he's had a great career, and I mean, just in terms of toughness and stick to it, and I mean, he went through the 8 years in San Francisco, where I think in his first 6. He had 6 different offensive coordinators.
Yeah. I know. And he's not a liar. Alex Smith is not a liar, according to Tom Condon, his agent.
That's right.
Say hello to all your clients. I mean, my gosh, there's a ton of them right here, man. And thanks for coming on the show. Please, can we do this regularly when you're here in Los Angeles,
yeah,
California?
Absolutely. Thank
Please
you,
do
Rich.
that. And your son is now working with you right now?
Yeah, he is. He's been let's see, he's been with me for the last 6 years, and he's a young lawyer, and so that's a very enjoyable part of the practice for me.
Fantastic. We'll come back as the season progresses. I could sit here and talk with you for another hour. There's so many issues that you're obviously on the front lines about with the NFL. So I'd love to have you back anytime you're up for it.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate it.
Same to you. Yeah. Tom Condon of CAA right here on The Rich Eisen Show.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.